Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Poland Daily History. Today we will speak with Mr. Piotr Jegliński, a member of a prominent Polish patriotic family. From the 1970s, he participated in the anti-communist dissident movement. Having started his own publishing house in Paris, he is responsible for smuggling forbidden literature back to the then communist-occupied Poland. Today, we will ask him about his life and struggle for a free Poland. You told us earlier that your upbringing involves a lot of meeting with the people from the resistance army of the World War II, and even your parents themselves were participants of the Warsaw Uprising. I was wondering if you can elaborate about their lives during the times of war. How does it look like?
Obydwoje moi rodzice byli żołnierzami Armii Krajowej.
Both my mother and father were soldiers of the Home Army from the very start of the Second World War. It was a legitimate military underground organization which was subordinate to the Polish government in exile in London. In our family for many generations there was a tradition of fighting for independence. Both parents were raised this way. Mother was sworn in the 1940s. She was part of a secret cell led by Professor Stefan Koppe. This cell collaborated with the Home Army's intelligence service. It was an assassination cell, which targeted its enemies with the use of biological weapons. The cell was located at the Warsaw University of Life Sciences, the largest agricultural university in Poland. The Germans shut down all universities in Poland, but had an obsession with germs and various types of illnesses, and paid particular attention to make sure there were no illnesses among animals, for example. Because of this, they allowed laboratories to continue their work at the Warsaw University of Life Sciences. So my mother was a part of this resistance cell. This is how they eradicated Germans, with the use of anthrax germs. It's a completely unknown field of knowledge. Very little of their operations has been studied by historians. The activities of her resistance group actually led to the Germans no longer opening letters with denunciations. Right after the Germans had invaded Poland, there was a plague of denunciations being sent to the German secret police, the Gestapo, in Warsaw. Entire bags with various types of mail with denunciations turned up. The Home Army decided to put an end to this and sent the Germans its own fake denunciations, usually targeting known collaborators, SS men and so on. These letters had been contaminated with different types of diseases, anthrax, tuberculosis and other types of germs. Eventually, the Germans realized this and brought in a special furnace from Berlin. They would immediately throw the bags of letters in it without reading any denunciations, true or false. At the very beginning there was mass repression against Poles based on the denunciations sent to the Germans, but my mother's team played a large role in stopping that. At the same time, my mother started studying at the Secret Academy of Fine Arts in Warsaw, which was under the guise of a tailoring school, involved in designing various outfits, sewing, etc. My mother's lecturer was Wanda Telekowska, an exceptional character in the area of Polish design, co-founder of the WAD group before the war. Professor Ostoja Chrostowski, who would later become the first rector of the Fine Arts Academy, also lectured there. These were the activities that my mother was involved in during the first years of the German occupation. On August 1st, 1944, the first day of the Warsaw Uprising against the German army, my mother left her house at Łowicka Street, leaving her mother a card saying, "Mom, don't worry about me, I will return in a few days." It turned out she would return to Warsaw after half a year. On September 2nd, a little over a month into the uprising, which had been expected to last no longer than a week, she was sent to the Jesuit monastery, because a huge pillar of smoke rose above the monastery and shots were heard. She was sent there to investigate what had happened, as word went around that the Germans shot a large number of Jesuits there. My mother had to crawl over there, because the very flat and open Mokotów field was around it, which made it very dangerous to try to reach it. The Germans had excellent positions to shoot at anyone trying to make their way over there, so she crawled in with a patrol and managed to reach 3 Jesuits, Father Mońko, Father Kisiel and Rector Kosibowicz. Unfortunately, the last one decided to stay behind to try to help other priests, and the Germans later shot him. So these traumatic circumstances had a great impact on her. She saw very terrible things around her during the Warsaw Uprising. In the middle of August, 2 weeks into the uprising, my mother received a proposition to serve as a liaison officer of the command of the Home Army. She became the liaison officer for the Home Army commander of the Mokotów district, mainly using a special sewage route. So what were these sewers about then? The soldiers of the Home Army used the sewage system under Warsaw to move around the city, sometimes also under areas that were controlled by the German army. And what was the special sewage route? Well, it was a part of the sewage system that the Germans had no knowledge about. The maps of that part of the sewage system had been hidden from the Germans during the first days after the German invasion. The Germans didn't know about this network, and it was a very lucky thing for the Home Army that they didn't. Other parts of the sewage system had been discovered by the Germans, either from maps that they had managed to come into possession of, or because of something that is not commonly known. The Germans had their own agents embedded within the Poles that fought against them during the Warsaw Uprising. These agents would pass on information to the Germans with the use of secret radio stations. They would sometimes manage to tell the Germans where important parts of the sewage system were located, and then German Stuka bombers, the field German ground attack aircraft or dive bomber, would bomb the canals. This happened especially often with the wider parts of the sewage system, those parts that functioned as storm drains or storm sewers. My mother used a special secret sewage route for liaison missions to the Śródmieście district, the most central part of Warsaw, on more than a couple dozen occasions. I don't really need to tell you how horrible the conditions were down in the sewage system. For a documentary being made about my mother and liaison officers using the sewage system, a team of sewage treatment workers went down to the same sewage system the Home Army soldiers had used back in 1944, without the equipment they use today. Once these men came up from this part of the sewage system, they were all vomiting, and it took them some time before they started feeling well again. My mother would often go through this disgusting bog on all fours, because these special sewage canals were very low, sometimes 90 centimeters, sometimes 130 centimeters high. The most important object she had to use down there was a stick with two rugs wrapped on both ends. She would move around with the help of this stick, because the sewage canals were egg-shaped, so in order to stay on your feet you had to support yourself with the stick. She made these dangerous journeys many times. She was lucky enough to avoid being shot on Dworkowa Street. Her friend from the liaison unit asked her if they could switch roles on that day and if the friend could lead the unit in the sewage system. Her friend led the unit that day instead and was shot on Dworkowa Street after unexpectedly having run into a German unit. After 63 days, the uprising ended, and my mother was one of the lucky ones who managed to survive the uprising. On her last journeys through the canals, she twice carried an order of capitulation from the headquarters. The first time around, the district commander didn't agree for his unit to lay down their weapons. The second time, she made a plea for capitulation, and the commander finally turned around and agreed to stop fighting. The last time she went underground, the journey lasted for 36 hours. She was terribly poisoned as a result of that mission, and long laid unconscious in the field hospital run by the nuns from the congregation of the Sisters of St. Elizabeth. She later managed to escape from the prisoner transport because all the uprising insurgents who had capitulated in the Mokotów district, which was the first to surrender, were taken to the German death camp Auschwitz. They were transported there straight from the horse racetrack in Służewiec in the Mokotów district. My mother was able to escape and also save a friend who had suffered serious burn wounds. She did this because she knew if she had left him behind, the Germans would execute everybody who was injured upon entering a hospital. Later, after the war, she returned to Warsaw and entered the Academy of Fine Arts. She was quickly warned that the communist security services were looking for her. For over a year, she hid in a convent near the city of Nowy Sącz. We believe she was active in the Freedom and Independence organization. In fact, we are rather sure of it. It was part of the military underground under the command of the Polish government in exile in London, which continued the fight against the Soviet Union after the Second World War had ended. She wasn't captured only because she never revealed herself, because she never trusted the Soviets and all their assurances, and also because the rector of the Academy of Fine Arts, Professor Ostoja Chrostowski, hid her dossier, which had been in the archives of the school. When the security services turned up, they were looking for a girl by the name of Eva. They didn't know her surname, so they never managed to find her. It wasn't until the 1970s when my mother gave over the documents she had saved, a pass for the special sewage route and a Home Army ID card with assignment to the command. When she gave this up, the security services turned up, photographed all the documents and suddenly realized that Eva 319, my mother, that was her codename during the Warsaw Uprising, is the person they had been searching for in previous years. They thought because of my activities in France, printing and smuggling forbidden literature back to Poland and the activities of my sister, that we all belonged to some secret post-Home Army organization. They persecuted my mother and arrested her many times. Right up until 1989, she ran the distribution of our publications. She was a uniquely honorable daughter of a Polish army officer. My grandfather fought in Lviv against the Ukrainians following the end of the First World War and went across the whole of Bessarabia with General Lucjan Żeligowski, who later became famous for winning back the city of Vilnius for Poland in the so-called Żeligowski Mutiny in 1920. In her childhood, my mother was sent to the kindergarten of military families in Belvedere Palace, which housed the Marshal of Poland, Józef Piłsudski. We actually still have photos of her sitting on Piłsudski's lap.
Chodziła w dzieciństwie do przedszkola rodzin wojskowych w Belwederze. Są jej zdjęcia na kolanach z marszałkiem Piłsudskim.
Mr. Jegliński's family, his personal history, and his activities is a perfect reflection of the generation-long struggle for Polish independence. At times, the resistance against foreign powers were fought with weapons in hand. But in other times, it was conducted with the smuggling of printing press and forbidden literature. That's it for today. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee. I'll see you next time on Poland Daily History.